Hi folks, Mr. Dell here. We are looking at CPM. This is from CC2, course 2, is specifically section 3.3.3, number 3-123. We've got the infamous diamond problems. So with our diamond problems, just a reminder, we have that set up right up here that remind us that that top number is always the product of each of these numbers. The x, y is what they list them as. They can be any number, any which way, a number and a number on the sides, left and right, and then you take those two numbers and multiply them to get to the top. And then the bottom is the sum. So then you would take those same two numbers and add them to get that bottom part of the diamond problem, right? So for our first one, I'm going to rewrite so we have more space and I can see it clearer. So I have negative 10 as the product, right? So this is the product on top. And then I need to know what is that number. So what I want to know here is I need to know that what times negative 5 is equal to negative 10, correct? So I look and say, oh, well, a couple ways to look at this. I could use division, the inverse operation, right? I could say, well, what is negative 10 divided by negative 5? Because that would give me what that number is, the inverse operation. And when we do that division, we end up with an answer of 2, positive 2, right? Positive 2 times negative 5 is negative 10. And then the sum, this number here is the sum. You take the two numbers, the 2 plus negative 5, and add those up. Remember, opposite signs, one positive, one negative. We actually take those numbers and we subtract them. And then I look to see who's got more as far as there's the signs. There's only 2 positives. There's 5 negatives. So my answer is going to be a negative 3. So that's the process. So let's look at, that was A. So let's look at B. And I'm going to rewrite B so we can see it better. So B, they give us our numbers, 3.4 or 3 4/10 and 10. So if that's the case, then I just got to take these two numbers and multiply them to come up with the product, right? Remember when you're multiplying a 10 or 100 or 1,000, right, times any decimal, it's a nice, simple look at taking that decimal place and just moving it however many zeros there are, right? So in this case, 3.4 times 10 would be 34. I'd only move that decimal place 1 when I multiply because there's only 1 0 there. All right, that only works when you're dealing with tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, etc. So then the sum, right? The sum down here would be adding those up. And so 10 plus 3.4. Remember when you're adding decimals and numbers when you're adding numbers with decimals, you line up the decimal place and add straight down, right? The decimal has to add and line up. So this is 13.4 when you add those up, right? The decimal goes along. So 13.4, 13 4/10. All right, let's look at C. So C, we've got a 16 in the product and a 3 1/5 is one of the numbers. So again, what goes here? What goes here is going to be 3 1/5 times something, multiplication, to equal 16. So what is that number? What is the number that goes there? So I could sit there and do some guessing and figure out what maybe that would be, or I could use the inverse operation. The inverse of multiplication is division. So really I could look at this as what is 16 divided by 3 1/5? That's would give me my question mark, the inverse operation. So doing that division though, when I divide a whole number by a fraction, in this case a mixed number, I'm going to want to put that in its fractional form. So let's start with 16 divided by, this is going to become, that would be 16/5, correct? When you look at 3 times 5, you multiply the whole number times the denominator and add the numerator, and that's the new numerator. And then when I'm doing division of fractions, remember the division of a fraction is multiplying by its reciprocal. when you divide a fraction by a fraction, you multiply by its reciprocal. So then, and then you've got this whole number that's being multiplied here. So I take that whole number, I put it over 1, and then multiply. I can either multiply straight across and come up with my answer, but prior to that, when you're multiplying fractions, keep in mind you can actually do your simplifying before you multiply, right? You can cross simplify is what might be determined. So you look at the diagonals, and I see I got a 16 on both top and bottom, so I could divide out the 16, and if you divide out a 16, they all become ones. Now you multiply and you get 5 over 1, which is the same thing as just 5. Okay, so all of that to come up with my answer back up here to say that number would be 5. And now the sum, 3 1/5 plus 5, add the wholes, you get 8, and then the fractions, which is just the 1/5. All right, that's C. Last one. So let's look at D real quick. D is, let's see if I can get it written in here. D, and I'll write it again. The product is 15. The one of the numbers is -3. So I'm looking for -3 times what is 15, right? What goes there? -3 times something is positive 15. So that's a positive 15, right? So that being said, what would make that a positive 15 if I'm multiplying by 3? Again, I could do the inverse operation and just look at this as 15 divided by -3. And when you divide, you get 5, and you got to consider the signs. It's a -5, right? Because it's a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So this becomes -5. Check it. -3 times -5. Yep, positive 15. Then the sum of -3 and -5, the same signs. You add the numbers, and it keeps the sign. That becomes -8. All right, there you go.